Constance Crawford.
Yeah, and when were you born?
1929.
How did you find out, as a child, how did you find out that war had broken out?
It was all over the newspapers and then on the radio, and the adults were talking about it, so I think we knew it was going to come, so we just took it in. It was not exactly in our stride, because we didn't know what we were not being afraid of, if you know what I mean, but we did know the facts that that was what was going to happen.
And what did your dad do sort of during and before the war?
Before the war, he worked in a firm that made bicycles called BSA. It was British Small Arms, which meant small arms guns and things, and rifles and that sort of stuff. And I think, as far as I remember, I don't remember very much about it, it was just the same thing. It was still going on because it was wartime stuff related to war that he was making. So when there's a war on, you don't take people away from the job that they were doing, which is making guns and rifles and that sort of stuff.
And what was it like before the bombing started? Did you notice any difference with there being a war on?
Yeah, people put shelters in the garden, which you thought would be sleeping in when the war started. But there probably was an awful lot of discussion amongst adults, but I wasn't that old to know what was going on, really. I mean, I knew there was going to be a war, but the details weren't discussed with children because it would have been a bit frightening for them, I imagine.
And can you describe the shelter that your dad put in your garden?
Yes, it was made of corrugated iron, and it was two halves of a circle, and it ended up like a sort of archway thing. And he put it where it was sort of a convenient place to get to, although it wasn't terribly convenient if you came in the middle of the night. But it was all right. It wasn't too bad. This was an Anderson shelter, and they were made of this corrugated material. And for people who didn't have a garden, there was things called Morrison shelters, and they were like sleeping in boxes because your head stuck out of the box, but the rest of you was in the box. And that was the only way to give protection to people. And I imagine now it was more psychological than anything, because if a bomb dropped close to you, whether you're 3/4 of the way in a box or not, you wouldn't have really survived it. But I think it was just so that people didn't feel, because they didn't have a garden, nobody cared about whether they survived it. It was sort of noisy and inconvenient and that, and he slept in a deck chair, and my mother and I shared a bed, if you could call it a bed, but we shared some piece of furniture with.
You didn't have bunks?
No.
No, proper bed.
Yeah. And then, well, yes, it was sort of proper bed, but we were sort of head to tail, my face by her feet kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
you said your dad was in World War One. Was he called up for World War Two as well?
No.
No?
No. I think not, because he worked for the BSA, which was the Birmingham Small Arms, which made weapons of various kinds, and I think that's probably why it was a reserved occupation, because he was doing things that they needed him to do in the war. I may be wrong about that, but that's what I believe to be the truth.
And what was Birmingham like during the war then? Did it get bombed a lot?
A fair amount, because there were a lot of factories there making munitions and that sort of thing. But it was, I as a child felt perfectly safe as long as I was with my parents sleeping in the air raid shelter. It didn't occur to me what was going on outside. I mean, I did know when you went to school it was difficult. Sometimes you couldn't get across the road because there'd been a bomb on something, and the pavements and the road itself, surface, had been damaged. So but I think it's just children don't realise how dreadful things really are.
No.
But,
and how did you find food rationing?
I don't really remember very much. Well, the one thing that didn't upset my family was that sugar was rationed, because none of us took sugar in anything. But I do remember one of my mother's sisters in floods of tears because her husband, who was rather a selfish man, wouldn't drink any tea because she got tea and so because there wasn't enough sugar in it. And she came to my mother in tears, and my mother said, "Well, you've got plenty of sugar," and gave us sugar. That's one of the main recollections of my childhood.
What would be a typical meal during rationing then for you?
It was difficult as a child. We had vegetables were all right, and there was a certain amount of meat that you got on the ration. You could have various kinds. That meat was rationed by value, and things like sugar were valued by the amount you had. But you could have, for sugar you probably got half a pound. I don't know. Everybody got half a pound. But if it was meat, if it was more expensive, you got less meat, and if it was less expensive, you got more meat. I think very much like the sort of dinner we have nowadays. It wasn't, food wasn't rationed at the beginning, and so you didn't have as much as you might have done otherwise, but the food was all right. We didn't starve or anything, yeah.
Do you remember seeing soldiers around?
No, we didn't.
Around the town?
No, because there weren't any barracks near Birmingham where we were. So if there were soldiers, they might have been just coming home on leave. I don't remember seeing any of them, but children don't think, is it strange or not? Because children are growing up, life's very strange to them anyway. All these things that adults do that you didn't realise they did. But,
What did you do if it went off at home then?
went in the air raid shaft.
Yeah, you just went straight down.
Well, depending on how near it was, I mean.
What if you were in the middle of eating? Would you take your food with you?
Might have done, probably. I think that it was more my version of what we ought to do. That I said we must go into the air raid shelter. Something, the bombs had started falling, which they hadn't. But you can't argue with small children when they.
Or do you remember hearing about the war's over?
Oh yes. Well,
Did you go out with your friends? Did you join a street party?
no, we didn't have any friends. I wouldn't have been allowed to anyway, but because my father had strict views on young girls going out on their own.
Okay. Did you go to college?
I went to university. I went to school. I got a sort of scholarship to the high school, which was a big one in Birmingham, and then I suppose I must still have been there. I went off to university when the war finished and everything was done, although we were still doing entrance exams when the bombs were falling, which I must say is a good thing, I think, to do with children, because they don't, life's got to go on, and you can't say, oh, we mustn't do anything because a bomb might fall on us, because you'd just end up a neurotic person, wouldn't you, if you're a child?
Yes. So was that must have been unusual at the time for a girl to go to high school and university?
I suppose it might have been. Well, I suppose it was to a certain extent, because they had this 11 plus exam, and if you did well enough, you got an offer of a place at one of the big high schools, a boys' high school and a girls' high school. I remember being very pleased that I'd been offered a place there.
Did you have to learn to type in
Oh no.
in high school? No.
No, that was not for people who. It was for typists, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, secretaries.
Yes, that's right. Yes, that's right.
Which university did you go to?
Birmingham.
Birmingham University. And what did you study?
English.
Okay. And what was your first job after that?
I can't remember what I did.
You were in the civil service for a long time, but was that your first job?
Yes, it must. Yes, it was.
It was.